Net neutrality was repealed a year ago. What's happened since? It's been a year since net neutrality was repealed. Gigi Sohn. Below is a lightly edited excerpt of Sohn explaining 3 things that have happened since repealing net neutrality that clearly demonstrate what the FCC did is terrible for consumers, competition, and public safety. You can hear this and more in the latest episode of the Vergecast. Nilay Patel. It's been a year since net neutrality was repealed and I've seen a rash of headlines about it. The National Review. Gigi Sohn. I disagree with you to the extent that I don't think these are little things. I actually think NP. What immediately comes to mind? Data caps are back. GS. When the Trump FCC repealed the 2015 Open Internet Order, it didn't just eliminate the prohibitions against blocking and throttling and pay prioritization. So in other words, but let me explain 3 things that have happened in the last year and a couple of months that clearly demonstrate that what the FCC did is really terrible for consumers, terrible for competition, and frankly terrible for public safety. I mean it really goes. The first thing that happened, and this is not insignificant, is about a year ago during the worst fire in California history, Verizon was throttling the Santa Clara County Fire Department's broadband. And Verizon and the NP, and that's not a trade problem. If you sell the thing, GS exactly. The fire department. So, the second instance of where the absence of net neutrality really implicated public safety was when a number of mobile carriers, T-Mobile, Sprint and AT&T, were found to have sold the precise geolocation data of their customers. If they sell them to again, it's very important to know that the FCC had privacy rules that we adopted in 2016 that would have likely prevented this from happening, because you would have had to opt in to the collection of this data. But once again, the third thing is what happened with Frontier Communications. They're mostly in. When I say they've abdicated their responsibility and the repeal of the 2015 Open Internet Order allowed them to do that, those are the deep cuts I am talking about. And those are no joke.
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park,